Council this morning. Apologies. I'm assuming Bonnie's online, so I'm not sure if there's any apologies. 14. It's great to see a whole lot more faces in the room after quite a long time, so welcome back, guys. I'm not aware of any declarations of interest this morning. Not aware of any public forums, petitions, deputations either. So we'll move to item 5, which is the confirmation of minutes for the ordinary meeting of council for the 27th of April. Are there any additions or alterations to those minutes? If not, would somebody like to move they be accepted as a true and correct record? Moved by Lloyd Esler, seconded by Jeremy. All in favour say aye. Aye. And we'll now move to the extraordinary meeting of council of the 16th of May. Again, is there any additions or corrections to those minutes? If not, would somebody like to move that they moved by Lloyd, seconded by Eric? All in favour will say aye. Aye. Right, item 6 is the adoption of committee resolutions. First up is strategy and policy. Eric, would you like to comment on your?
I'm happy to move it. It was a very fulsome meeting, our longest meeting, but very valuable time of catching up with a lot of reports from various science areas, etc. And I think probably the most notable thing was the establishment of the Climate Change Subcommittee, so the next stage of that, which Lyndall's going to chair, but the meetings, the minutes cover the meeting adequately. Happy to move.
Moved by Eric, seconded for that recommendation. Peter, any further discussion or questions? If not, I will put the resolution. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Move to the Registry Committee meeting of the 12th of May.
Chairman, I'll move the adoption of those minutes, and I will presume people have read them and taken as read. If anybody's got any questions, happy to address those.
Thank you, Neville. Any questions of Neville? If not, would somebody like to second the resolution? Seconded by Alan. I'll put the resolution. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Move to the Regional Services Committee meeting of the 12th of May. Jeremy, would you like to comment on your?
Yeah, I'm happy to move. Noted, and that was good round up with what's happening on the ground and the work that's been done. Any questions?
Any questions for Jeremy? Not, would somebody like to second that resolution? Seconded by David. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Right, we'll move to the Southern Civil Defence Emergency Management Group meeting of the 18th of May, which is for noting only. You want to make any comment on that, Neville?
A couple of things here. We've had a visit from the Minister, Patty Allen, who was very interested in work that's been done down here, particularly the cooperation between councils to create the entity that we've got in Southland. And we've also had MPs from the National Party down had a visit to talk about our response to the floods, and we did a presentation for them. The other thing is the AF8 project, which Emergency Management Southland is involved with, and Simon Matt is actually here in South Island with that, has been receiving a lot of publicity. And we finally, one of the focuses of the program was to alert people to the possibility of a major event, an earthquake over on the Alpine Fault, and to be prepared. And it's getting traction now and quite a lot of publicity, which is a good thing. So if anybody's got any other questions about that, I'm here to answer that.
Thank you for that, Neville, and it was actually good to meet up with Minister Allen, who took on board regional focus, what we're doing here, and we were making sure employ not to change something that was working very well, and she seemed very receptive to that. Robert?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question to Councillor Cook with regard to alpine fault preparations or readiness. Was there much talk about access to and availability of food security in this area in the event of a major disaster? Not only the alpine fault, but other things that you deal with. And can you tell me if there's anything that you know of that's in place or in train?
I know that there's continual training going on, through Mr. Chairman, for food and electrical and telephone and fuel security in the event of a large earthquake. While we may not be as badly affected in Southland by an alpine fault earthquake, the rest of the South Island will be, and all of our supplies are hubbed in Christchurch. So, we are at risk and we are aware of that. I know we haven't got as far as Franz Joseph, who've got containers of food and medical supplies sitting there because they're sitting right on the fault line. We're not quite at that stage, but planning is in play.
I have an idea for
Lloyd?
Yeah, Jim, partly to answer that question from Councillor Grazing is that I chaired the Southern Regional Transport Committee, and that's very much on our agenda. And we're talking South Island wide, not just Southland, looking at all the major arteries and connectors for road, rail, sea, air, right through the whole South Island for specifically there. When we have breakages and air linkages, and how do we respond and how do we put in the resilience that we need. The Ashburton Bridge was a classic example of major disruptor. That bridge is gone, it would have been worse, but they're able to fix it. So it is on the agenda, maybe not necessarily in the EMS work stream, but we are working, multiple work streams are happening in that field.
Could I respond to that, Mr. Chair? Thank you. That's good to hear, Councillor McCullum. And I notice that the government has made some great progress just recently on coastal shipping, proposals for coastal shipping. And I wonder if you're factoring that in terms of rescue or provision of vital resources. Did that come up under?
Just going to reply, Mr. Chairman, through you. Yes, it is, but it's bigger than that. One of the things we're looking at is how does New Zealand service the world as far as shipping is concerned, and how do we service those major ports? So if you get down to, say, 3 ports in New Zealand, one of them being in the South Island, how do we service from Bluff to there? So there's multiple linkages and the servicing. The government's put more money into the Wakamatahi, into the rail, into the shipping possibilities, and looking at the infrastructure that goes in there. So very quickly you get into not only how do I do the day-to-day stuff, but how do I do the emergency stuff and how quick can I get there? There's a distribution centre in Dunedin that saved us last time. We may need to think about that in a different way, to have different distribution centres sitting around the South Island to get through this 3 to 5 day period. But we will say, you're quite correct, we need to look longer than that because the disruptor could be bigger, it could be 6 months, and we need to facilitate that as well.
Thank you.
I notice we do have a few ads on the tsunami warnings about to get gone, but probably a few years ago we had everybody having an emergency kit in their house. I suspect a lot of those are gone by the wayside, and that just having enough food and water on hand and a torch, all those sorts of things, probably quite good to have a bit of publicity from time to time, because after a while people do forget until something happens. But
Sure, if I may, I think you raise a point. If we have a major disruptor for whatever reason, to house what I've seen through the rest of New Zealand over the last couple of years, to house people at short notice at scale, I don't think we've got that one covered off. And I think we probably need to think about that in a bigger context. And we've seen in the North Island, that is probably where we're lacking more of some of our work streams.
no, we didn't actually have to move that resolution. I think it was just for noting, wasn't it? Okay, we'll move to the South Point subcommittee. Oh, we do. Okay.
You need a second, Councillor.
I move.
You've moved.
I'll second.
Seconded by Lloyd. All in favour of that resolution, say aye. Right, we'll move, last but not the least, the Southport Subcommittee meeting the 25th of May. David, would you like to comment on
Yeah,
this?
I'd like to move that, Mr. Chairman. Just the main topic actually that wasn't in the committee was actually a health and safety report from the chairman, and really just the positive culture that was at the port, and they did have an audit, and there was very little, only a couple of small issues. So we're pretty happy with that report. Also, we're looking at having a health and safety report at the meetings in the future too, because of the importance of it and some of the issues that some of the other ports throughout the country. So, I'm quite happy to do that.
Moved by Neville. No further discussion. I will put the motion. All in favour will say aye. Aye. I'd like to move to item 7, notification of extraordinary urgent business, supplementary reports or other. I'm not aware of any this morning. So move to item 8, questions. Peter, you have a question this morning. Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, just I just want to put a bit of context. I'll read the question, put a bit of context around it, and it's in regards to our role as regional leaders. It's a key priority of the council regarding evolving policy around climate change and the need for Southland and New Zealand to secure more, significantly more sources of renewable energy on the road to decarbonising the economy. So there's a lot of words and it's a bit of a mouthful, I know. But my question is, does this council feel concerned that at least 150 megawatts of the renewable power coming out of the mandatory power scheme's potential of 850 megawatts is to be used for 2 data centres, which long-term's contribution to Southland and the wider community beyond construction, in my view, is quite questionable. So I want to just to stir a bit, because I know it's a really live issue at the moment. I just want to stir a few ideas around the table and get the conversation going on that, because we have a significant gap, in my view, to make up in the next 25 years on how we power our local economy here in Southland, and that thinking needs to start now. So
We'll just start on that, Peter, and I'm not sure we should be getting down to individual projects, but what you raise is actually the lack of a long-term national energy plan, and I think that is quite essential going forward. I mean, those data centres in the future don't necessarily have to come from Manapori. The line upgrades will allow energy to come from further north going forward. But it is a question. The other thing is, with the work being done with Murihiku generation, I think the importance of actually having a Murihiku united front on green energy in Southland and its uses would be quite useful going forward. Robert, you're indicating.
Thank you. In response to both of you, you know, that's a good point, Nicole. The struggle that everyone's having, including central government, with envisaging what it means into the future in terms of energy production is a huge issue. And I'd suggest, Councillor McDonald, that a workshop could be triggered from your question, because there's a lot of discussion that needs to go on from a lot of different parties before we can settle on anything that's even vaguely realistic in my view. So a very good question. Thank you.
Eric.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, but it's a subset of a much bigger question. Currently, we live in a world that combusts 8 billion tonnes of fossil fuel a year. And if you look at how we're actually going to replace that and what priority is a data centre, but the big question is, what do we do about generation of electricity to pick that up? And if we look at taking Huntly's coal burning out of the national grid and say the transport industry in New Zealand potentially is about 30% electric and the rest is sort of a hydrogen combination, we're going to need 7 more mandatory power schemes equivalent in the next decade. And that means solar, wind, hydro, the green, and what we're prepared to accept and where they go, or is it a substantial modification of lifestyle? They are all the big questions that no one has really sunk their teeth into yet, but that's a very important subset of that big question that I think we need to embrace.
Neville.
That's another observation, Chairman, and it is a question that could spark quite wide debate, but I think it's use it or lose it as well. That Manapuri is generating power. The lines companies at this time arranging for that to be piped north to other centres. I think we should be doing whatever we can to maintain that electricity supply to Southland and creating the users down here.
And I think, we do have an exciting opportunity, and the tragedy of the Ukraine war is actually bringing these matters to the head a lot quicker than it probably would have happened. A couple of years ago, you might have said hydrogen was a wee way away. It's actually moving at pace, and there's talk of Onslow, but also hydrogen can be also a battery that you can store it in ammonia or another form in an off-peak way. And I think as a country we have to be more innovative about where we're going, rather than, for a while we've heard, well, we'll electrify the main line and do all these things, but there could well be, and there will be, a number of alternatives.
Can I just, is it okay for me just to make another comment?
Okay, then we'll move on.
I just want to support what Eric was saying. That is the big question, because fossil fuels run right through the capillary of our society. It's the miracle of the modern world. It's given us all, and we're talking about decarbonising, and it's going to go down to our personal lifestyles, what we're willing to give up in running running our local economy. So I think it is a very big question.
Lloyd.
Just a matter of process, should we move the question to the Climate Change Committee for them to follow through with? I think it's appropriate that we pick up the theme of that with the comments today, and because this question is not going to go away, we just need to understand it better and how we communicate to the different parties that we need to.
We've got indications around the room. It looks like Lloyd's moving and Lyndall seconding that this issue in question be relayed to the Climate Change Committee.
Yes, and if I might comment on my seconded motion. The regional discussion over through the climate change opportunities will be significant, so that's a good place for it to come through, I think.
Resolution been moved and seconded. If there's no further discussion, I will put the resolution. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Okay, we'll move to Chairman's and Councillors' reports. I don't have a report this morning. Are there any council reports? Here, Lloyd.
Mr. Chairman, I've done a couple of environmental challenge facing Murihiku over the last couple of weeks, and I've found them fascinating, actually. The community is more engaged than I thought. They like the smaller groups, talking to them, and we've had very good support from Tammy. Maria has done an excellent job in supporting staff. I've had Bonnie with me yesterday and Rachel with me the other time, and they've done an excellent job in explaining and interacting with the smaller groups, and they've actually all gone over time. I think that's a positive. We tried to shut it down last night after an hour, but they wanted to go for an hour and a half. So, and they wanted us to come back, and they wanted that communication to carry on. And we said we would. It's just a matter of let us know when you come, or we have information we need to go out. It is a big time commitment. They slotted us in between 8 and 9 on their agenda last night. The Riverton one was 2 hours, I think, Robert, wasn't it? So it is a big time commitment, but I think it really adds value to the work of Environment Southland if we can do that, and I'd like to encourage it. So,
Thanks for that, Lloyd, and it is a big commitment, and I think we probably need to get a few more of our councillors involved in the various areas, because to talk to everybody in 30 at a time, it's going to take quite some time, but there is an appetite for to have those two-way conversations, and I think more importantly than the whole presentation we get is making sure we have time to do the question and answer and people knowing that we're listening. Lyndall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a plug for holding some of those gatherings for the Invercargill and Rakiura constituents. Please.
Thanks for that. Any further reports we've got? All over the place. So we'll start with Robert, Jeremy, Lloyd Esler, another Peter probably.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I report on a meeting held this weekend that I was invited to by the representatives from Greenpeace, who are presently travelling the country to hold a number of public meetings about agriculture as their focus, and in particular nitrate use or synthetic nitrate use, to which they are strongly opposed, and the promotion of the reduction of herd size, quite significant. However, at the meeting, through the discussion there, the conversation switched to food sovereignty, and you can imagine I might have influenced that slightly, but that became the focus of what we talked about, rather than those more head-to-head issues. And the discussion went on for, I think the meeting was 3 hours long, 3.5, much longer than they were anticipating. It was very exciting. And feedback I've had from them since is that has given them a new focus for their national program. Perhaps it would be bold to say that, but that's what I've heard. So just thinking that even in challenging situations, people really appreciate a positive approach and the opportunity to give forward-moving ideas rather than just blocking. I don't mean that they were doing that, but anyway, that was the meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that. Jeremy.
Yeah, I just wanted to do a wee bit of an update on, we're obviously doing our catchment liaison committee meetings, and it's always good going out to the river groups and talk to them. That's one thing. Obviously we're discussing increased costs, most living in this environment, and it's always good to discuss increasing costs and getting ratepayers to pay more money. But one thing that really come out is that, and I just wanted to say great thanks to the team, that they have a lot of respect in the community, the actual people on the ground doing the jobs. It's really good, and I just want to pass that on, which makes the discussions easy when you are talking about the workloads and the costs. So everybody agrees they wanted the work to keep going. So, and also there's always discussion around the stakeholders that are involved in discussions or have involvement in gravel removal and river management, and it's good to hear that that's sort of improving and getting everybody on board. So it's just a big thanks to the council here.
No, thanks for that, Jeremy, and I'm sure it'll be passed on to the staff, because that area has been under the pump for the last couple of years since the Matara floods and other areas, so that's good feedback. Lloyd Esler.
My sort of usual peregrinations for the month, Mr. Chairman. Quite a lot of time with schools, I do quite a bit of environmental bits and pieces amongst the Mori Hiku and the primary school physics and all that. So at Woodlands yesterday, in lieu of OPAC, and presenting environment badges to children who've done projects. There was one girl there who'd slain 12 possums, and people are planting things and cleaning up rubbish, and great to see that. Remu School have got an restoration program, homeschool kids interested in stuff. There's a bush kindy at operates at Kerrs Bush out at Myra's Bush. Watatara School would be so good stuff happening. I went up into Otago and had to give a talk at Waimate, and Waimate is Wallaby Central. It's where they were introduced, and from there they've spread north, south, and west. Had they spread east into the sea, that would have solved the problem. But They have an enormous problem there, and they've got there are three sort of covenanted areas there, each with a separate trust running them. And I checked a couple of those, and they're cleaned out up to about 1.5 metres above ground level. And it's a huge wallaby problem, and that is coming this way because they'll be this side of the Clutha, and they're heading this way. And this is much worse than possums. This is much worse than rabbits, and these guys live in the bush, so that is coming. Waimate had used the wallaby as their emblem for a long time, but they're now in the process of what they're calling de-wallabification, which is the process of removing the wallaby as your town emblem and replacing it with a white horse, which is up on the hill and very nice. Also called past McRae's Flat and had a look at the big hole there, which is, this is one big hole if you haven't seen it. So that's the one of Environment or the Otago Regional Council's.
Below sea level now.
It is. If you've never seen a big hole, go and have a look at that one. But it's been restored. Very impressive with what they're doing with conservation and pest trapping up there. Also saw Folden Mar, which was in the news just 2 or 3 years ago, which is a large area. It's a former lake bed that's got rich and diatomaceous earth, which was going to be mined, but it's sort of in abeyance at the moment. So that'll be interesting to follow. So just the main point was the wallabies, which are coming. They're coming. Thank you.
Not the English.
The
Wallabification.
That's quite a good term. Should we pass it on to the All Blacks before the next World Cup? Now we've got Peter, then Neville.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Been to a few meetings, but one that stood out in mind was a Dipton Catchment Group one I went to, which they picked up on a potential social project. So outside of the bounds of most catchment groups around water testing, but they're sort of identifying the, you could say, our local institutions aren't what they used to be. We don't have the participation, and I guess that's not uncommon to Dipton. It's all around a lot of rural areas, and this has been happening for some time. But the local members understood that those institutions provide connection around health and well-being, but it's so crucial right across the community. So everyone just likes to say, and they commented on this, that it's not the same as it used to be. But there's a group there in Dipton that are saying, well, you just can only say that for so long. So very interesting start of an idea for a project anyway. So well supported by 2 years staff that were there and Thriving South. And so, yeah, very excited to see where that goes.
Thanks, Peter. Neville.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just wanted to focus attention on my relatively short written report on the LGNZ 5 and 6 Zoom meeting. The things that come out of that really struck with me was Jim Palmer presented the future of local government and the experiments which are being carried on, and this is a bit of democracy in other parts of the country with government funding behind those. Quite different than what we've got now, suggesting will change in the near future. And added to that, we had presentations around RMA reform, climate change legislation, the free waters, local government review, and the review of the emergency management legislation, and apparent intent by the current government to complete nearly all of that work before the next election next year. So there's a whole lot of things rushing in on us, and it's going to happen very quickly, and there'll be pressure on us to respond and adapt. So who knows what will come out of it. But
Thanks for that, Neville. And there is a tsunami of legislation coming forward that we all have to react to, and it is quite fatiguing just to have so much going on. But I will give a brief report. One of the roles I have at the moment is the local government representative on the Osprey Stakeholders Board. Attended that in Wellington a couple of weeks ago. There's an organisation that started off being the TB-free group. In recent years, they've had the NATE AirTag thing has become part of it. and really very much on the back of the bovis outbreak and the real deficiencies in tracing animals. The final decision hasn't been made, but with M. bovis more or less under control, there is a real possibility that the M. bovis will be added to what they're looking at. It does seem to be a natural fit, but I'm looking at the budgets and what's going on, and there's still a few things and the other things that need to be focus kept on, so it'll be an issue to keep watching it. They all do interlink, but it is, it's a big program of work. Any?
He's got his hand up, but it's not
Oh,
showing.
sorry.
Okay.
Forgive. Sorry.
They don't show up.
No.
Go, Jeremy.
No,
That was before. No further reports? Right, we will move to item 10, and first item up is the acting chief executive's report. Wilma, would you like to comment on your report?
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Chair. We're very happy and the team is here with a number of staff to answer any of your questions on any of the items. I thought before we do that, I might just highlight a few matters that may be of interest to the community and to yourselves, of course, in relation to the program that's underway. I just wanted to note that the Environment Southlands Community Awards are scheduled to open this month on the 21st. We had the first Environment Awards last year in a sort of COVID setting, which was a strange transition with only part of the kind of event that it normally is. This has amazing entries and an incredible reach in the community. So this year those awards are booked for the 10th of November, and there's a paper before you today to discuss the policy for those awards and the appointment of the judging panel. It's always a highlight in our calendar. The other matters that the strategy engagement, planning and engagement team have underway, just to note that the appeals process for the proposed Southland Water and Land Plan, they're still underway. That is part of an ongoing long-term process that this plan has been going through in the courts, but just so that people know that that is still a live matter and is working through, we would trust towards an end-of-year date. There also today in front of the council is the surface water activity plan change, a discrete plan change to provide some clarity, particularly for our consents process around vessels in the marine area. And we have a survey underway currently around the use of burners in the region. So we are working through our air quality program that's in the LTP, still without a national environmental standard to work to, but nevertheless work does need to progress. There are issues. In the integrated catchment management group, just pointing to a couple of things. One is that the survey data should be back now from in relation to gravel management, and that's going to make a massive difference to the understanding in this group and the way that this is managed going forward. So that's very good news. And also just to point to the fact that the work is underway that needs to be completed within the next 12 months to provide the assurance program around the dams in our region, and that is a requirement now under the new MB guidelines in relation to dam safety. I was going to comment on the Catchment Committee liaison meetings being excellent, but Councillor McPhail has done a good job of that today, so thank you. And in relation to wallabies, which also seems to be a thematic matter today, there was some reporting of a sighting of a wallaby, but there has been an investigation of that, and there's no wallaby as far as we are aware. So we do think that it may have been something else. It may have been
A tourist?
a tourist. No, I think perhaps a very large here. So, but whatever it was, we're not convinced that there's wallabies here yet. So I'm pleased to say, despite the councillor's warning about wallabies from Waimate making it below the cliff, that we don't believe they have yet.
Judy.
Just like to point to a couple of other matters. There's a lot of information in today's report in relation to the applications that are in process in relation to consents. I'd just like to point out that the statutory timeframes are being met by the consents team to almost 100%, 99, which feels like 100% to me. I'm very pleased to see that, and happy to report it to you. The other very important piece of work that's underway is our annual intensive winter grazing program, and there is a particular focus this year not only on the intensive winter grazing support and the collaborative work we have with the sector, but also the extension of that to consider what the impacts were of the drought on the season this year, and what the impacts might be coming out of the winter season in the spring. And so that group that meets and works collaboratively around intensive winter grazing is coming together to work on all of that. Cultivation, the flights, have you got any update on that, on the flights at the moment?
I think Graham will give an update.
Thank you.
The first flight is due on Friday for the intensive winter grazing, and without going into, I don't have the specifics, but they will be focusing on a number of the properties that have been given advice through the catchment integration group.
No, thanks for that, and it's a timely reminder to people that we are looking. We've been doing education, but if people don't follow the rules, which they should be, there will be consequences. So good to see we've done the education. We know areas that look risky, and obviously that's where the focus will be for the first flight.
Moving to the corporate group, just to report that recruitment still remains a challenge for us and is a very busy process for the organisation. We still have movement of staff in and out. We've got a number of positions still out for being advertised at present and unfilled. And this is a matter that is, part of our ongoing conversations in relation to our budgeting. Is there anything that you want to add to that, Amy?
We're sort of a victim of our own success in some regards, so this is a good news, bad news story. Many of our vacancies we've been able to fill internally, which means we're creating career paths and development opportunity for our people, which is one of the things that attracts and retains people within the organisation, but at the same time it means that we just keep having a rolling series of vacancies. So that is somewhat challenging for us, and as we have spoken to informal, we're focusing on the budget as well, and our ability to progress work as swiftly as we would like.
I've got a couple of questions. I'll take Robert and Lloyd. Lyndall.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the acting CEO for these reports. Are very interesting. I'm always drawn to the Biosecurity and Biodiversity report. It's field of great interest for me. And I noticed that there's, under incursion reports, there's discussion about an organism which is just given its Latin name there. I did look it up and discovered that its common name is sea vomit, and so I wish I hadn't. That doesn't spread
I was going to
widely.
ask for a picture, but maybe I don't know.
But the second thing is, I noticed down under plants, where I always look, and the discussion about knotweed on Stewart Island, which I presume will be the Indian knotweed. I know that it is. I believe it is. We can talk about that later. But I see that you comment that it's responding well to treatment, and I'm pleased to hear that. So it's up and it's fitting well, and looking well fed and ready to go. Is that? I know that's not what it's meant. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Lloyd.
Gerald being a school teacher.
Chairman, I just wanted to ask a question around the dam safety guidelines. My understanding is that we don't have certification in our staff for some of the dam work, and we gave that to Christchurch, I understand it. And I'm not too sure what our responsibility is in regard to the dams that are mentioned here and our role in connection with Christchurch, because my thoughts are that they're all one and the same, they're working together, but what do we need to do? Because we could have more of those in the future, the retention dam type structures for weather events, and I just want to make sure we're connected correctly.
Absolutely, and so all of it.
Yeah, just through you, is Rundle online? Rundle might be able to. Oh, okay, I'll give it a response. You're quite correct. We've got an arrangement with Christchurch ECAN through some of that certification and management, but we'll also in terms of practical stuff need to have engineering resource on hand as well as part of that being managed and covered by. So I think what this is suggesting is that we know what we need to do and what we're responsible for, and that's being accounted for. There's sometimes it's crossover with the arrangement with ECAN, but there's a lot of intercouncil conversations around that.
So I presume there's two-way communication where it's been driven from ECANs for this to happen, and we're feeding the information in so that they have comfort. Is that correct?
Yeah, and Lucy, you got anything to add?
Yeah, through you, Chair. So the arrangement that we have with ECAN relates only to the Building Act functions that we delegated. So in terms of all of the other functions that relate to our dam safety responsibilities, we retain with those. And so the management of our assets are still our assets to manage, but it's the Building Act function. But worth noting that the dam safety regulations that we've just recently released, staff are currently working through, so Gavin in my team and Randall in Paul's team are working through what the implications of that actually mean, and we're intending to come back with that. So it is a bit complex with the ECAN contract as well.
Yeah, we need to get that connection right.
Absolutely, we just contract, it's a business contract, like as in any contract that we have with externals, because they have certification, but our responsibility is our responsibility.
And I guess the key supplementary to that is, has the review actually made it more onerous and likely to be more costly in the future, or is it?
So, to that point, we are working through the details of that. There is a higher level of stringency in terms of what the regulations now require, so we need to figure out exactly how many of our dams will be caught by those. It's not, all dams are not made equal, so there's a difference in delineation between which are required to have what level of assessment undertaken. To your point about ECAN, Councillor McCullum, they go through an external audit process, and the last one was completed just a couple of weeks ago, so we've got an external audit report from them as well. So yeah, I can put that
And that might be a useful report to the risk OPEC, I think.
Lyndall.
Thanks, Chairman. Two quick things. Well, the media inquiries paragraph on page 9/57. I'm assuming that the data doesn't include the new version of the website, etc., or does it?
I might need to ask one of mine.
It's pretty new, so I wondered if the information is related to the new page, the new setup. Well, the new look website.
Oh, so yeah, I think it just relates in general to the website rather than anything specific.
Okay, because there was some.
Are you talking the online services?
Yeah.
Not that only launched.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, so I understand the question.
Yes,
so,
sorry, I didn't explain it very clearly.
No, so this is we are now reporting analytics on our media for you in this report, but that does not relate specifically to the new portal, which I was going to mention as the next sort of terrific thing we've got underway.
Okay, cool. I'll leave you to do that. My other question then is, you talked about new staff. And there's a few in the room. I don't want to put them on the spot, but I wondered if somebody could introduce them, please.
Who are they?
Because we haven't actually met in 3D version for quite some time, so if,
I was going to say, you are not the only one. It's been interesting coming back to the building. It's like joining a new organisation.
So we probably do for you have some new staff in the room and also a visitor from the Ministry for the Environment. So would people like to introduce themselves that have not been to a council meeting and met the council?
sorry, I know that's not everybody's cup of tea.
I'm Carl, so I'm a new digital and channel advisor. I've probably dealt with some of you in my previous life as a journalist. So, hi.
I'm Shana. I work in the policy and Kia ora koutou. I'm here for a month from MFE, so I'm learning and observing as part of this comment from the Chief Executive Board. So,
And this is Wallace.
I'm Wallace. That's my name.
Welcome, everyone.
Thanks, sorry.
I just wanted to make a couple more points. The council is to note that there is some information here, but very briefly about LiDAR, but just to remind you that we do in fact have a workshop on this tomorrow, so, which will give you a lot more information about that. And I wanted to just also make a comment on the matter that Councillor Ludlow raised, which is that we do have this new dashboard that is on our website, which is to provide better online services basically and access to progress around consents and a lot clearer, connection to information that people are interested in, such as water takes. So that just went live since our last meeting, and that's a nice step forward into customer service there. In relation to the transformation program, John has been working with the managers of the organisation and all what he describes as the respective business owners, and pulling together that program, and we've got some time scheduled, I think, to come back to you with a workshop on that program in a few weeks' time.
Lloyd.
Thanks, Chairman. One of my interests is the back room, as many of you know, and I understand we've got quite an investment going into our back room to hold data, and it looks like going forward, data at scale. And I just want to make sure that that is on track to do that, because I think there's going to be a lot of information coming in. We need easy access to that information, and we need to be prepared for it, not running behind that information trail. So
that is absolutely correct. And so, council, is the reason that we had the digital transformation aspects of the transformation program is exactly that. We need access to really good quality information and analysis for our ability to actually manage the organisation, but also most critically to inform our development plans and the implementation of our rules and their follow-up. So that piece of work is very much at the forefront of our program as an executive. The reason that Dom's here is to integrate that and to drive that forward. And Amy may like to comment briefly about information management in general and where we're at in terms of some specifics, but that is certainly a priority for the organisation.
Here, I just say, the risk of using the buzzword that we said we weren't going to use it. It is a bit of a journey for us. The more that we learn and understand about information management, particularly the more that we realise that it's not just about the digital systems that sit behind it, but actually how we define, treat and deal with data. A big thing for us as an organisation duty is to look at ownership issues within the organisation. So it's not just a case of going out there and bringing it in and putting it through the sausage machine and driving inside out the outside. There are a number of other matters that we need to address as part of that, good data governance, making sure that we have good information management, project all these things. So it is an area that is new for us, so it's quite a big piece of work that spans the entire organisation, and it's a good opportunity for the
Okay.
I'm aware that data collection, as Amy has quite correctly pointed out, and accumulate and being able to retrieve data is important. I'm probably flicking now to the other side, is that we have a whole lot of individuals out there that have a relationship with us, and we need to make sure that relationship is professional, and we're not, there's been some instances in the past where we've had a collective response that has not gone down well with some. We need to have an individual response because they have consenting issues or other issues that we need to interact with. So we need to be professional on the other side as well. That's one thing we need to keep an eye on.
I completely agree, and talking about the span of this across the entire organisation, it speaks to our persona as an organisation, and then you get into the realm our customer service personality and how we engage. So it's like I said, it's not just bringing the data in and putting it through the sausage factory. It spans the entire organisation.
So our approach to this is that we're looking for a customer service experience that's both personal, which means that if you're an entity or a person, you can deal with your information and with us with you, and that it's personable, that it's not, something that you just receive as some, as you say, bulk response, basically. And we've got a bit of work to do there, but it's a serious amount of work to get done.
It's good to hear that is coming together, because it has been difficult for the last few years with different systems not quite shaking hands as well as they could have. So once it's seamless, it's obviously good for us, but also good for the customers. Anything further you want to come in?
No, I'm very happy to take any further questions, but that's the highlights of the report. I think there might be something.
Who's the report being argued?
I think Alan might have been waiting patiently. Were you?
I am waiting.
Pardon?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. So just good report, Wilma, so thank you for that. I got down to page 64 and made a note to question that one a little further. So under Harbour Management, and we're noting there are currently 109 cruise ships booked to visit Fiordland, and 24 of those are visiting Rakiura Stewart Island over the coming season. So I know there's bookings and then there's reality. Do we know that the bookings are going to be reality, or are we unsure at this point? And I've got one other question which I'll also add to it before. We had quite a bit of work done on the cruise ship deed.
Yes.
Before things sort of turned into nobody was coming, so and perhaps. But my question really is: have we progressed that deed? Is the industry all on board with the new terms of the deed?
So the deed, to answer your last question first, the deed has been agreed and was agreed before we went into lockdown. So we have the updated deed. Sorry, and good, thank you for asking, because actually I highlighted this to talk about and then skipped past it. Is that we are planning for the season because the borders have opened, but we're taking a very, so from a harbour safety and from preparation point of view, we're gearing up to make sure that we're able to deal with that. From a fiscal point of view as to whether we're expecting there to be cruise ships, we're taking the precautionary position that we took in the LTP. So we don't know. The industry always talks very positively on this matter, but we don't know at this stage exactly what might come, unless Lucy has anything to update me on that I don't know, but that's the position as of last week.
It'd be fair to say there was probably a similar number of bookings for last year, and there may have been one small boat that came in. So people keep their slots, but...
So there's no, if they don't come, they pay a deposit or forfeit a deposit?
That would be nice, but no, it's not the case.
No, through you, Chair, not at this stage, no, that's not part of the deed at the moment. What the deed renegotiations set was that the timeframe for it expires when the regional coastal plan review comes into play. So the industry know that as part of the regional coastal plan review, we are looking at how we are managing cruise ships in the Fiordland area, and that will extend to the conditions that need to be adjusted in the deed. So it was an item that was reversed during the negotiations. Negotiations I was present for, but not leading on, but the deed got reasoned out of that.
Well, if there's no further questions, would somebody like to... Moved by Lloyd, seconded by Eric. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Right, we'll move to item 2, which is the Southern Pest Eradication Society Community Consultation.
Kia ora, Council. I just, I think you know Nick Perhan, who's our Implementation Integration Manager. Nick will talk to the bulk of the report, but we'll take it as read. I know that Council is familiar with this report, and this report really follows on from the consultation that we undertaken as part of the
had a rabbit control conversation in the southern pest eradication area. So, Nick, were there any points that you think to make in terms of the consultation?
So the consultation went on for a few weeks, and by mutual agreement, we agreed to extend the time that we took submissions in. Having said that, there were only an additional 9 submissions during that extra week that we allowed. I collated the data. Pure site is purely neutral. And all queries, phones and emails came through me and me alone, so we kept it quite narrow control of that. The results were significant from a statistical perspective. Approximately 300 letters were sent out, and to have almost 200 responses from a statistical perspective is phenomenal. And the results speak for themselves, really. And then we met here with the Southern Pest Eradication Society people and had a bit of a discussion and presented those results. Particularly focused on the key theme that came through with the feedback that accompanied it, which was around the not willing to pay an extra rate or the extra administration fee that we charge for administrating this. But through that discussion, they sort of, I think, agreed that this was the way forward, and that's the way they wanted to approach it, and agreed that that was actually what we needed to do to continue the volume.
It's worth noting to council that there's a survey back to report.
Yeah.
I think we'll leave it at that, and
Yeah.
happy to take any questions.
No, thank you for that report, and I guess this is a situation we do reflect on who we're here to represent. We've had a strong result to a survey, and there will be still people who are opposed, but this is democracy at play, and as you say, a very strong result to get that percentage back in a survey is quite powerful. Obviously, there's something we probably review again on the LTP, but it's been, I think it's been a good, transparent process, one, to bring in the group and have the conversation, but also it's publicly available, and the reasons people supported it or opposed it, they're all there for people to read. So well done, guys. It's been a wee bit of a journey, but yeah. I've got Robert, then Alan, and Lyndall.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Aside from the community response, which I recognise, my initial concern in listening to this discussion was around culpability, if that's the right term, of the council in terms of collecting rate money for work done by a separate agency. Has that been resolved? Yes.
So by the fact that the rate is for rabbit control, and part of that would be to have a contract, which means that the control is with Environment Southland, and then there is a contract to undertake that work. So that's the clarity that we've needed as part of this process, I suppose.
All right. Yeah. So part of that contract will also result in the lifting of the game in terms of both our side and the Southern Pest Eradication Society, what they're actually delivering. So, because we have to meet our minimum standards around this.
And that's one of the reasons for the increased costs, because like a lot of other areas where we have a contract, we have to have oversight. So that's part of that picture. Alan.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. So just two questions. Noting that a lot of the concern with the ones who said yes was their awareness of the rate increase. Did we communicate that we would be able to give them some transparency on how we would use or administer the process? So if we found that we were doing it within the rate, we were prepared to adjust the rate, or if again on the other side it was costing us more, we would adjust the rates. So do we give them any undertaking that we would do that?
Yeah. So what I've been clear
through this process was to try and articulate the nature of that cost that you've alluded to, which is, in general, contract management, health and safety oversight, administration and some facilitation. Council can be assured that we worked hard to get a realistic number. If through the first year that we as an organisation, I suppose, managed to provide that oversight for less than we've suggested, then I'm assuming there'll be a process that we could highlight that and make some changes. I think that's a normal process that we can follow. So my instinct is that we'll be quite close, I would have thought, and we wouldn't have put out a number that wasn't accurate. But yeah, if the actuals come in less, then for sure there should be a process in which we can amend that.
And so the second question then really relates to the time frame we're going to issue the contract to the Southern Pest Eradication Society. Have we given them a time frame?
Well, I think I don't know if we've defined the time frame, because that's part of, I suppose, the contract negotiation that we would go through. But it's fair to say we'd follow our standard contract approach. I'm not entirely sure, but it might make sense to link it to the LTP timeframe. But that's just a suggestion. I'd need to come back to you on that when we get into that conversation.
So would there be a competitive tender process at any stage in the future?
Potentially, I think the approach is that council can agree to continue with SPS as the contractor, and that's that. But in future, that could be opened up. That's for sure. I think what you might find on the ground is there's there's not an abundance of contractors potentially. I'm not sure, so I'm not sure, but that's stuff that we could explore in the future for sure.
Lyndall.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just two things to say. Pleased that we are really close to solving the problem and looking for the opportunity. And really interested to see the comments and thank the community for their honesty in their commentary. And look forward to this appearing on the risk register via OPEC. Thanks.
Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been a little bit of a long journey, but I think we've got there through a whole lot of process. And to answer a couple of questions, we talked about each long-term plan, looking at this again to make sure that we're right, because there could be cost adjustments. The Southern Pest Eradication Society know that from time to time, it may not be every 3 years, but we will go back and talk to the community again to see whether there's still support, so they understand and know that. The fee was discussed, and my understanding and their understanding is if it comes in less, it'll be passed on in some format or another. And if there's more, we need to have that conversation, but it won't be next year, it'll be at the end of that contractual term, and that is still to be worked through that detail. And my last comment, Mr. Chairman, is that while it's seen as being rabbit, there is by-kill as well, so there's possums, hares and stoats and those sorts of things that they do as part of that as well. So there have been other conversations around whether they can do more than just straight rabbit in a professional manner, and those things will flesh out over time. But we're really pleased that they've come in twice now. They've had good community involvement, good communication. We've now got a position where we can move forward, and I think everybody understands where we are, so it's been really positive. Thank you to the team, to the staff. I think the other thing is the report that you see in the papers is actually more than that Nick's put together, and they're going to see the full extent of that. They've asked for that, and we've agreed to give them the full every comment, positive and negative, in its raw form. So they're really appreciative of that and found that was very useful as they carry on their work. So thank you.
David.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, it's good to get a result out of and the communication with the community. Just a query. There's obviously a few no's, and just reading reasons. I assume the normal procedure when, if they decide they're not going to pay that rate, I imagine that's just goes through the normal procedure as collection. Because some of them are reasonably strong in their opinion as to doing their own rabbit control.
I guess the reality of this rate is it is collected. They can still say I'm going to do my own, but at the moment they can't opt out of that. One of the other interesting things was the community's changed a bit. Some people said nobody's been here, but they didn't realise they actually had to invite time for health and safety. It wasn't like the old days where they could just turn up. Been a learning process, I think, right through. And I guess it also comes down to the local and local government. Just because most of the province doesn't do this, and you have a community to stand up and say, look, we still want to do this. And we've said, well, we're going to do it in a way that's ticks the boxes for health and safety and all those other risks. So that's, it's been a long journey, but it's actually been quite an informative journey, not just for us, but for the community. Neville.
Thank you, Chairman. I concur with what you've been saying. I'd like to move the recommendations that we've got there, all of them. But just noting we've had two quite good debates on whether we're going to do this or not. And we've had advice about the organisational risks that might result from us carrying on with contracting this southern pest people. But I think those have been sorted now, they've been resolved. So I'm comfortable with those. And there's a level of confidence in the group and the work that they've been doing over quite a long period of time, the knowledge that they've built up, that they'll do a good job for us in the future. So I'm really pleased with the outcome, and I'm going to move the recommendation.
Thanks, Neville. Seconded by Lloyd. And actually, at the end of the day, a survey was well overdue. So there's been some really positives in this. Any Jeremy?
I'll just make a quick comment. It's obviously a good way of working with the community, understanding the community's needs, whether it may not necessarily maybe with other ways of doing things, but actually saying, well, this is the way they want to do it, take it on board and understanding the community's needs and getting a good outcome. So.
There's no further comments. I will put the resolutions. All in favour say aye. Aye. Against, no. Carried. Right, we'll move to item 3, which is 2022 to 24 fees and charges schedule. On page 6. Welcome, Tony. Would you like to comment on this item?
Thank you, Chair. Each year we review our fees and charges schedule. We consider our cost recoveries and whether they're meeting our policies, our budgets and our RMA obligations. With increasing cost pressures, we are recommending that the hourly rate for our staff charge out increase $5 per hour plus GST. We are not recommending any changes to our fixed charges this year as they are in line with budget. We're required to consult because our charges are all within the RMA remit. We need to consult with the public, so we're recommending that we undertake a special consultative procedure, which will open shortly and close on the 1st of July. In addition, there are some minor changes to the schedule, which we've added some text to improve description and clarity in several areas, and made a minor adjustment in the coastal science section to improve consistency amongst the stakeholders there. And finally, we've added another complete column that is showing the GST inclusive pricing. It does look like a new column. It might look like a 15% increase, but it's in fact the same cost with. Now I'd like to just mention, as pointed out yesterday, there was one number in your schedule relating to the gravel consent application. The GST includes the column number needs to be amended, and it will has been and it will go out. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Neville.
Just operationally, how are we going to conduct this consultation? Give us any one month, how are we going to communicate?
It's all web-based, and the comms team will also be communicating with stakeholders and the general public through the comms plan. It's a fairly simple consultative process, and it's exactly the same as we had last year. The majority of our consents come in through consultants, not all, but the majority. That's our first place to consult, and then we make sure that it's available to other people.
The proposed statement proposals attached to your papers, councillors, page 99.
One noting, I see it is in yellow on page 83. I see that we are increasing the free half hour to an hour.
Yes, sorry, I didn't mention that. Yes, and recommended by our consents team.
Right.
I see in the previous reports we're talking about the quality of applications. I think their recommendation was to give more time to the applicants, would be well rewarded with improved application.
No, I think it's a very positive step, and I think it'll make things flow a lot better. We just knowing where the goalposts are and people not going down rabbit holes that are timely and costly for everybody. Lloyd.
Yeah, can I just reinforce that, Mr. Chairman? I've had a number of people contact me about the procedure, and I said, did you take up the half hour at that stage? And they said, no, I didn't know. I said, well, get a hold of Bruce or get a hold of your consultant and make sure you, the consultant, and the ES consent person are in the room and actually talk through what is needed, what is not needed. And I've had feedback that that was actually very good to do that. I said, and be prepared to go back, even if you have to pay. These consents are getting more and more complex, and they're quite big, and you need to know what's going on and what is actually needed on farm. So there's always a follow-up on consent conditions. You need to understand what that actually means within a timely manner as well. So there's been a good asset to that process.
Tony.
If I could follow up, Chair, I'd like to just say that we undertook quite a review last year of the schedule and trying to improve how we presented our information to consent applicants and consent holders, so that a comprehensive understanding of the total cost of having a consent, as well as the consent application, is ongoing charges. We've had feedback from that and taken that feedback on, and hence these changes to both descriptions and the adjustment of the GST column. But overall, it's actually been very positive, and that particularly with regarding the deposits, the increase in the application deposit, there's less surprise for those people when they receive their final account. Not all, but mostly within their total deposit. So we've I think made some really positive changes there, and certainly given more certainty to many of the applicants.
No, I think it's a really good move, and I know in the past it's been a frustration at times that sometimes we have consultants who are giving us a whole lot of information that's costing the client but we don't actually need. I think this is part of our sort of front-facing, consumer-based thing. If we can give them there and people know what they need, it's a far better process right through. I know Lloyd and I have suggested to people in the past, if you've got something complex, it's much cheaper to take people out on the farm and show them before we go through the process. So at the end of the day, it's a more efficient process, and actually people are happy with the results. So good to see those changes. Any further?
I can move the recommendation.
Moved by Alan, seconded by Neville. No further discussion. I will put the motion. All in favour will say aye. 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 Against, no. Carried. Good. Right, we'll move to item 4, which is the response to the draft National Adaptation and Management Retreat. Takes a moment while Lucy takes on the hot seat. Would you like to comment on the report, Janelle?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have an opportunity to provide feedback to the draft National Adaptation Plan and start the discussion on managed retreat policies that are being led out of central government. We had a workshop on some of the high level things a few weeks back where we did reflect on the fact that particularly the National Adaptation Plan is quite high level with not a lot of detail about implementation, a lot of inferences to how much responsibility will fall on local government, but not a great deal of detail as to what that will contain. So what we have put together is a very high level response to both the adaptation plan and the managed retreat policy, reflecting that there will be a lot of work in this space coming through over the coming years. One of the key things about this response is that we have managed to successfully achieve all 4 councils in Southland putting this response together. So midway through our meeting this morning, I just got confirmation that Gore are also happy to sign off on it as well. So we've worked collaboratively with ICC, SDC and Gore. We also were working with Marama, but because of the constrained timeframes on responding to this, they weren't able to go through their internal processes. So we've been in discussions with them, but unfortunately they were constrained in being able to attach their sign off on the response as well. So we have proposed to insert an extra sentence into the response up front to articulate that because of the timeframes iwi haven't been able to follow, haven't been able to go through their own processes, and that is an issue with the focus on co-governance moving forward that the government is referring to. With regards to a couple of changes that Gore have suggested as well, so they just want clarification in the managed retreat area with regards to what we mean by perverse outcomes, so giving an example of what a perverse outcome if we don't follow through managed retreat properly would be, and also with regards to implementation of policies, just talking a bit about some of the practical alignments with regards to building code changes and LIMS and how up-to-date climate data should be reflected in that as well. Otherwise, this went through the climate subcommittee last week too, so happy to take any questions or feedback.
Thanks for that update, Janelle, and it's actually good that we're going to have a consistent regional approach to this thing, because I think in the early stages before we get to managed retreat, it's having the conversations about where building's going now, and because that would be one of the perverse outcomes if somebody builds and finds in 20, 30 years' time that wasn't such a good idea. Those conversations need to be had now. Further comments?
I think we shouldn't underestimate to have the full council put together this document and actually sign off on it. Shouldn't be underestimated. I think that was very important. The other thing is, while iwi haven't effectively signed off on it, was there any concern come through from your staff level interaction that was a concern to them, or was it just that they needed to go through the formal process to have a formal adoption?
To that question, there were a couple of key concerns that they flagged early on. One is that while central government referred to, integrating iwi values into how we approach certain issues like adaptation and mitigation, it's not overly reflected in the National Adaptation Plan in particular. So while there's a lot of reference to those high-level approaches that we might want to take, the practical things that are being written in the document aren't necessarily reflecting alternative or different approaches to responding to climate change. I think the other key thing that they fed back was with regards to managed retreat, and this is really about we need to be having these critical conversations right now about how we are approaching issues such as breaking connection to country if certain areas of Southland need to move to different places as a result of climate change, and that perhaps that isn't properly reflected in some of the early conversations that's coming out of central government for management.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just wondering, in response to that, whether we could pick up a little bit more in the iwi commentary. The two things, and the reason I say that is that I know up north some of the maraes and the burial sites are probably within the managed retreat area, and I think if the government is serious, they need to understand the connections and what that means early in that process, and that reinforces the timelines are quite tight. Not everybody can meet the quite brief windows, and we're seeing those getting tighter and tighter. They need time to think about this and process it and probably interact with other parties as well to see what that looks like in real life. So I'm just wondering whether it's appropriate to put a little bit more flavour in the front of that.
And I guess this first iteration is high level and draft. There will be ongoing conversations.
Yeah, high level.
We've got Lyndall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Doesn't play to not given first because people say what you're going to say. So yes, absolutely, the leadership that this has shown across the getting the five groups together has been really important and a really good start for our climate change subcommittee. So thank you, because you've done all the work. On the iwi perspective, yes, there are going to be lots more opportunities for us to feed into government's thoughts. But I would hope that once they have settled on an attendee for our climate change subcommittee, then we'll be able to front foot that time frame issue, I hope, because we'll have voice in the room, so I really look forward to that person being able to. And again, thanks for your clear messaging included in your draft. Thanks.
Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Also, I'd like to support the commentary around a joint up response, mainly for the reason for me is that we must avoid overlapping responses in this province. We know the pressures that will be coming on the ratepayers well into the future, and we have coordinated approaches absolutely necessary. So just want to support that. I also want to ask a question. When we talk managed retreat, it's usually around the context of sea level rise. And we see the pictures on the television, of those sorts of things. But can we use it in the context of a catchment? So when we're talking managed retreat, there'll be some areas down our river systems that may have to be looked at. Is that a fair summation that it goes wider than the coastal areas, that term?
Yes, so I think anywhere that may have significant impacts as a result of climate change that may result in, for example, people having to move, whether that's a coastal zone or a river then that would fall into the definition of managed retreat. I think following on from that, and probably again something for the climate change subcommittee, is that as a council but also as a region, we need to have clear definitions as to what we mean by managed retreat for Southland. So we have definitions coming through central government as to what managed retreat generally means for New Zealand, but we also need to have very clear discussions in Southland as to what that means for us down here.
Like a likelihood would be people in the property infrastructure, so forth. Thank you.
Robert.
Chairman, yeah, I wonder if I could just ask, but firstly, well done bringing Gore into the tent, if that's what you did. It's very pleasing to hear that. My question is about them. And I'm thinking back to the time when Bill English's plant was being built out there that was going to make briquettes. And I remember that there was some anguish around Gore's involvement or position there, because the coal, the lignite, low-grade lignite, was to come from a mine in their area, and there was an involvement with some of their councillors at that stage. Have they brought up the issue of that particular mine and their involvement in terms of the wider picture, the climate change issue? Have you heard anything being mentioned about that? And I wonder if you know, you may not be able to comment, but is that a live issue for them? Is that something we need to take into account?
In terms of the live issue, I'm not sure for them, but I can certainly reach out and see if I can find an answer to that question. With regards to whether it was an issue in terms of drafting the submission, it didn't come up for them. So, but I can certainly reach out and find out if it is a live issue.
I would suggest that the decision wasn't Bill English's. I think from memory it was an SOE that went a bit belly up. It'll be interesting.
Knew him well, he was a good friend.
Happy to move, Mr. Chairman.
I will second it.
Seconded by Lyndall.
Yeah, speak louder sooner.
Gotta be pretty quick.
All in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so carried. Right, we'll move to item 5, which is the responses to the Binomia consultation and PCE report.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I'm just going to introduce, and obviously Ali's here too to answer any technical questions that you might have. I just acknowledge the fact that we are coming to you for retrospective approval for 2 submissions. This is not how we like to do things, but the timing of these 2 was very tight and we didn't have appropriate amounts of notice or ability to be able to bring to you in advance of this. So we are seeking retrospective approval for 2 specific submissions, one on the Binomia consultation that was conducted by Biosecurity New Zealand, and secondly, a report done by the Parliamentary Commission for the Environment on the management of weeds and the threat to native ecosystems. So I will not profess to be an expert on either pests to oysters or even weeds, but my team were involved in the pulling together of the papers for this, which is why it's for me to introduce. We've got some time this afternoon at our biodiversity workshop to discuss in more detail, but I just wanted to draw your attention to a couple of points. So obviously the Binomia focus was on the long-term management changes that Biosecurity were advancing, and the PCE report was more of a environmental kind of status review, and also recommending some further changes as the PCE often does. So I'm happy to take any questions, Chair, but obviously, as I said, Ali is the expert. So if you have technical questions, I'm very pleased that she's here. And I should also nod to Shana from my team, who you were introduced to before, who's been doing all of the heavy lifting on this from a policy perspective. So yeah, just very grateful.
I've got Neville, Robert, then Lloyd, and then Lloyd.
Thank you, Chairman. I see little point in having a long discussion, detailed discussion about this. It's already been submitted, and if we're going to be hearing about it in a workshop at a later time, I would move the recommendations as they stand at the moment.
Moved by Neville. So we've got a second that at the stage, but I do have people with questions, which I think I'm a stake anyway. So I've got Robert.
This mine won't take long. With regard to Binomia, it says here Binomia kills 90% of naive oysters. That's accurate.
So through you, Chair. Yeah, I believe from overseas studies where Binomia has been in the system for quite a lot longer.
No, I mean the word naive.
Oh yes, yes. So naive as in, so when they so it's naive. So when they haven't been exposed to Binomia before, when they don't have any immunity, 90% of them will go. It's the same with.
That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
That's the clarification I was after. Yeah, all right. And the second thing was, have I taken this rightly from the PCE's report that they are recommending a shift from a focus from agricultural weeds to those weeds which are threatening native biodiversity in stands that presently exist?
I believe it was to highlight that the natives need to be done as well as the economic. So it was acknowledging that a lot of the work that has gone in previously has been on economic ones, but there's a whole bit that's been missed. But part of the submission that the council's put together is saying that whenever we're prioritising, we need to take all into account. So we need to take economic, social, cultural, and just environmental into account. So you can't really separate.
That's good clarification, thank you.
Lloyd.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, my question really is a process one. We're in here quite often, but two, we deal with a lot of stuff through emails. Through this process, even if we can't line up with a council meeting or a committee, is there a way of actually flicking up and saying, this is the timeline, can you give us 24, 48 hours, can you have a look at this? It's going to come up at a council meeting. Is there anything that actually sparks a response so that you've got some governance feedback as well as the staff feedback through? I got no problem with what's here. Neville's quite right, we'll retrospectively pass this. I think there's no problem with that. I like the way it's set out, I like the recommendations, it all makes sense, it follows a good clear pattern. But we can actually, is there a way to actually connect us even though we don't meet time?
So, through the chair, just, yes, we need to be doing more of that. And just whilst we were sitting at the back there, we've just received another exposure draft for something else that's come our way that we weren't expecting. So I will take your lead in terms of email responses and flagging things with you as urgently as we can so that we're not having to come and ask for retrospective approval.
Good Lloyd.
No, I'll ask my question this afternoon. I'll second Neville's motion.
Thank you, Lloyd. Linda.
Again, similar question. I was just going to ask if it was an imposition that made the time frame an issue or whether it was an internal thing that made the time frame a challenge. Because we need to look for a way forward so that you don't not
So
same position again.
through you, Chair, I think it was probably different for both of them. So one of them had a very short time frame, and the other was being handled at that biomanagers and policy managers SIG level. So between Ali and I, we had quite a lot of confidence that we were going to get our concerns raised. So those two things had tight timeframes, but it is to Councillor McCullum and your point, there are some process improvements that we are going to take from this, and we are getting thick and fast exposure drafts on a raft of things. So we need to be a bit more agile about how we're doing that. Thanks.
And just at the bottom of that Benamia, I sat in here probably 12 months ago for an emergency meeting when there appeared to have been an outbreak, and it's really encouraging that it turned out not to be the case. I mean, we have the last wild flat oyster fishery in the world, and hopefully we can protect that going forward. So I've had the item moved and seconded. If there's nothing further, I will put the motion. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Against, no. Carried. Yeah, it's probably if I'm not seeing anybody.
No, that's fine. It's just six.
Right, the next item up is the Environment, Health and Community Awards, judging for the appointment of judges.
127.
Pardon?
127.
127, okay. Okay. Would you like to comment on the report?
Take it in brief, Gail's here too.
Good morning, councillors. We've got an item up today which we're requiring a couple of decisions from you, but first I just thought I might remind you about last year we did run our Environment Awards and we gained record entries but had quite a pared back event due to COVID restrictions, and the year before we in fact cancelled our awards for the first time in the 25-year history. So again, due to COVID, this year we plan to have a full event, do it the way, so where we have an earlier event for sponsors and councillors to meet, and then our full awards evening. We are planning to start the process this month with calling for nominations. In terms of the decisions that we need from you today, I'll hand over to Nicole, who introduced herself to you earlier in this meeting. Nicole will be organising this year's awards. Nicole.
Thanks, Gail. So obviously the two things that we're looking for is obviously the policies being reviewed and put forward with a change which is related to this year being election year, and also for 2 councillors to be appointed as judges for this year's awards.
Thanks, Nicole. Lloyd.
I think the change you've made are practical and sensible, and I think it works well. So I'm happy with the policy. So we talked about some nominees for change.
Yes, I think we're open for nominations.
I think Lyndall and Peter were the names, and their stand-in would be David.
We've set that motion, we're going to move it.
Second.
Seconded by Eric. It's open for discussion. Peter.
Yeah, look, I'd just like to say to Gail there too, like last year's event was absolutely fantastic when everyone was cancelling events right across the board, and we needed something to bring people together. It was a wonderful night. It was hard work, as we know, but well done for the team for running that. And look, we often get people criticise, well, you're not celebrating our successes, but this is one event that we can bring Southlanders together to pat each other on the back, and I think it's really important. And connecting people with like-minded sort of ideas to share those ideas, I think it's really worthwhile.
Lloyd.
Yeah, just I'm not sure it is or was the policy that a project nominated for an award was not successful was not eligible for renomination. I'm just wondering if we can clarify that, because quite a few good projects missed out last year because of the tier 1 system. So my preference is that any project could be nominated any year without that.
Okay, I'm not sure, sorry.
I can respond to that. I'm sorry, I had a little bit of trouble hearing, but from what I understand, you're asking about how often someone can be nominated for the awards. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
The question, Gail, was more about them not being able to be re-nominated the following year. I would have been surprised if that's the case.
I don't have the exact wording in front of me, but there is a period of time where, unless the project has changed significantly or something new has come to light, that we don't necessarily take nominations year on year. That's right.
Yeah,
we say that to everyone, however they've. It's not that they haven't made it necessary. Like last year was the first year we put in place a 2-tier system because we just had far too many nominees. There was no way we could visit them all. So we did a 2 tiers where the judges had a look at the applications and made a first round of decisions, and then they went out like they always have and visited people to do the judging.
The point was that the ones that did not get judged last year should be eligible for nomination this year.
Yeah, I'd have to be honest, I don't have it in front of me. I'd have to look a bit more closely at that. With it being the first time that we'd done it last year, but they were judged, they just weren't visited.
Yeah, I would question that, but I would just like the policy to be anybody available for nomination at any time.
I mean, those awards have been going for a long time and we're constantly reviewing them. But I'll ask, I know David's indicating probably Lyndall to make a comment.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I think it's probably an area we need to look at, because in the past we haven't been in a position where we haven't had, we've gone to 25 nominees and dropped out any numbers above that. Maybe something we should do have a look at the ones that haven't made it. Their opportunity to actually go in the following year, so I think it's probably an area we need to look at. Just on last year, and I think we made the comment, the meeting after the awards last year, what a terrific event it was in a climate that nothing much was taking place. Hopefully this year it'll be a full-blown awards night. But no, it's a commitment, and I think that it goes very well. This year was pretty challenging, this last awards I should say. And we actually had the opportunity to show Port Southland. Unfortunately, we didn't get to Stewart Island. We were unable, and that's the situation there where the school entered, and we were unable to get across there too. So that's something we do need to look at for this coming year.
Thanks, David. Linda, do you want to comment?
No, not really. You know, I'm kind of well invested, and I see great value in the program, and you know, victim of our own success actually, because we just, as Councillor Esler has alluded to, we get a huge variety of entries now, and so we managing fairness and economics and timetables and all of that stuff is actually quite challenging. So it's a big ask of the people who are attending. So that would be my only comment. But I love the stories that we hear, and I love meeting with people. So here I am again, having said I wasn't going to do it again.
Any further? Alan?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to really support what Councillor Kessler was saying, that we've got to be careful that we don't limit people's opportunity to come forward again, and particularly when there's multiple categories, that we don't find ourselves with only one in a category. I don't know where that could happen, but that would be difficult and not what we want if we only get one applicant, and maybe last year we had 4 or 5, and some of those would have been good to consider against the one that we have got. So I'd like to think that we were able to revisit some of those ones who put themselves forward, because it's not easy, and I know there's a couple of people who are quite good at encouraging groups to come forward, and they won't be there forever either. So we've got to be a bit careful that we don't find ourselves in a situation where we've only got 10 people who are prepared rather than we might have had a lot at some stage. So.
Chairman, can I just comment on that? Sorry, I know I've had my turn, but the other side of that is that maintaining and growing the standard and the mana of the awards also needs to be considered in that conversation. I'll leave it there.
No, we had a good conversation, and I think the staff and committee members can have those conversations going along. So I'll put the motion. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Against no. Carried. Right, we'll move to item 7, which is the councillors' meeting schedule.
The first thing we need to do is approve Councillor McDonald's leave of absence from the 30th to the 9th of June, although it's been listed on the schedule, it hasn't been formally put through a meeting in the past. But other changes to the schedule, we've been advised this morning that the Tiana Catchment Liaison Committee meeting is likely to move from this Friday, due to the fact that locally there's a funeral that will involve a lot of the members and at the same event, the same place. So it's likely to be pushed back a week. But that's kind of moving as we talk. And the environmental challenges facing Murihiku presentation to Waimatupu Catchment Group is also likely to move off Thursday the 9th of June due to a clash with another meeting that many people want to attend apparently. So there are 2 changes. The South and Balance Farmer Environment Awards are being attended by the Chairman, Councillor McCullum, Councillor Beard and Councillor McPhail. And I've also been asked, I haven't scheduled them yet, but there are going to be monthly Council TAMI workshops booked in from June going forward on the Water and Land Programme now that the Regional Forum is reaching its conclusion. So just to be on the lookout for those.
Lloyd, And then
More a general comment, there's been one or two meetings that I'm involved in that doesn't get to Jan through their processes. And I'm copying Jan in where I can, but they don't come in through Jan, and so she can't see them. So we need to make sure that your coordinator is up to speed, because it makes a big difference with busy diaries trying to put in workshops. And the other day we actually had two events. One was the South Island Regional Chairs meeting I wasn't able to get to. We covered for it, but some of these things are bigger than just the Southland activities. We're connected into more South Island activities.
So I guess it's a reminder for us all that we do have a commitment to let Jan know so that she will be. David.
Just a leave of absence, June 7th and 8th, or 7th through to the 9th of June. Thank you.
Eric.
I've got 8th to 12th of June. A number of things. Conference and No Farm of the Year, which I'm patron of. I'll be absent 8th to 12th as well.
Any further bids?
I'd love some time off, but I've got nowhere to go. And I can't.
I'll throw one in. Have a bit. 10th July to the 18th July. Hockey tournament, family time. I'm not under 18, don't worry. So not me this time.
Right, if there's nothing further, would somebody like to move?
Mr. Chair.
Includes all those requests for leave for absence. Moved by Alan, seconded Peter. All in favour, say aye. Aye. We'll move to item 8, which is the common seal.
I'll move. I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded with lightning speed. I will put the motion. All in favour will say aye.
Aye.
I didn't turn the page.
Must be always copied on. Item 11, extraordinary urgent business. I'm not aware of any. So that will end our public part of our meeting today. And Jan will give us some reasons why we're going into public split.
We're going into public to confirm the minutes of the council meeting of the 27th of April and the extraordinary meeting of the 26th of May, to adopt the resolutions of the Regional Services Committee meeting of the 12th of May, Strategy and Policy Committee meeting of 25th of May, and to deal with item 9, a discrete plan change to the regional coastal plan. The reasons are to allow council to carry on without prejudice or disadvantage negotiations, including commercial and industrial, to prevent the disclosure or use of official information for improper gain or advantage, to allow council to carry out commercial activities and without prejudice or disadvantage, to protect the privacy of national persons, and the decisions that council are to make are subject to appeal to the Environment Court, and therefore council is authorised to deliberate in private.
Thanks for Jan. Having heard those fulsome reasons, would somebody like to move into moved by Lyndall, seconded by David. All in favour will say aye.
Aye.